In this video, I want to introduce the digestive system and talk about the major digestive organs and how they work together to get the nutrients from food into your body so your cells can use them. So as you already know, the function of your digestive system is to break down the food into its individual nutrients, the smaller components that we need, and then get those nutrients absorbed into the body. So the digestive system is more than just digestion, that's the breaking down part, but it also includes absorption. The nutrients move into the circulatory system. The circulatory system, your blood vessels and blood are the transportation mechanism to get things around your body. So you have a coordinated response between digestion and circulation in order to allow both first the digestion part and then the absorption and moving to your cells. Your body is very much interrelated. These different systems in your body all work together for the end purpose of keeping you alive. Really, there's 4 parts to digestion. First, you have to ingest the food. You have to take it in, and for the most part, that is coming in through the mouth, though in extreme circumstances, if somebody is unable to chew and swallow, a tube can go directly into the stomach, or if they are, because of a severe medical condition, need to have nutrients put directly into the bloodstream, we can do that. But for the most part, we take in our food through the mouth. Then the food is digested. It's broken down into those smaller nutrients. Thinking back at the beginning of the year, we talked about our biological molecules. So digestion is taking proteins and breaking it down into the building blocks of amino acids, taking carbohydrates and breaking down into the building blocks of those simple sugars such as glucose or fructose, taking your large fats and lipids and breaking them down into smaller components as well. Then those nutrients move out of the digestive system and are absorbed into first the cells that line the digestive system and then eventually into the bloodstream and then to individual body cells. And then we have egestion, or getting rid of the leftover wastes. So at the end of the digestive system, the end of your food tube, we have some solid wastes that need to be removed, things that can't be digested. So digestion starts at the mouth, the beginning of our food tube. And in the mouth, food is both physically broken down as we chew with our teeth, but it also begins to be chemically broken down because inside your saliva, you have a particular enzyme known as amylase, which helps break down carbohydrates. So you actually are starting to digest things as you chew. There's not a lot of digestion going on, but there is a little bit. And there's a simple test that you can do that I'll explain in our lab activity that you can see if you can catch this amylase digestion happening in your mouth. You may have noticed how much your tongue is involved as you eat, especially if you've bitten your tongue or something, you're more aware of it. And it actually helps the food get all mixed together with the saliva, so it's moving the food around until it's forming a ball, which we call a bolus. And then this bolus moves out of the mouth through the pharynx, which is just your scientific name for your throat, and then down your esophagus. But before it gets to the esophagus, we have a very important structure called the epiglottis. On this diagram, the epiglottis is right here. And you see it sits at the top of this passageway that's in the front. That is your trachea, so it is going off to the lungs. And in the back passageway, that's going to your stomach. That's your esophagus. So let me finish writing here. So the epiglottis is a door, and the epiglottis can fold downward and cover this opening to the trachea so that food does not pass down, so the food goes into the esophagus and not down the trachea to the lungs. You don't want anything in your lungs that isn't air. In fact, if you are coughing, it is probably because something has gotten down through this passageway and it's irritating your bronchial tubes, your trachea, and the first part of your bronchial system, not in your lungs proper, but on the way, and your body is trying to get things out before it actually gets into the lungs, because it really is just a one in and out passage, so things that get into the lungs often end up staying there if they get down too far. So your epiglottis is really important for being able to close off the top when you are swallowing. If you swallow too quickly, you might, get something down the wrong tube and cough violently because the epiglottis has not had a chance to completely close. Incidentally, if you are sneezing, that's because there's been irritation up here in the nasal passages. So a sneeze is to clear out the nose, whereas a cough is to clear out the lungs. So after the food has moved into your esophagus, then it is passed down by a muscular contraction known as peristalsis. And this is a pattern of a wave-like pattern of muscle contractions that move the bolus down towards the stomach. So you would have contraction happening, look at it in our diagram, contraction happening here at the top, which is going to push the bolus down a little bit further, and then when it reaches this next section, as it moves down the tube, you'll have contraction again at the top, which would push it down further. Peristalsis allows you to actually swallow if you were standing on your head. It'll move the food down your esophagus against the force of gravity, though of course doing it when you're in a more upright position, gravity helps get the food into your stomach. Now, the food doesn't just drop into your stomach. At the end of the esophagus, you have a ring of muscles known as the esophageal or the the lower esophageal sphincter. We're at the bottom of the esophagus. And so this is a circular band. A sphincter is a circular band of muscle, so it's going all the way around this tube that's your esophagus, and it will open when the food bolus reaches it so that things can move into the stomach. This is not so much a door to the esophagus as a door to the stomach because it keeps the stomach acid from moving back up into the esophagus. The stomach is just a big muscular pouch, and it will be contracting so that food particles will be broken down as those food particles mix with various enzymes. We call that mixture gastric juice, and it contains acid and the enzymes and a protective mucus that will keep the stomach from being digested itself by its own gastric juice. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the disorders of the digestive system in another video, one of which is an ulcer where, for various reasons, the production of mucus breaks down in an area and the stomach acid starts digesting the stomach itself. You produce about 1.5 liters of gastric juice a day. So if you look at a 2-liter bottle of soda, not quite that much. Most of that liquid is reabsorbed and reused, but some of it will also be released as waste at the end. As I mentioned in our video on the immune system, the acid that is being secreted in the stomach and the cells that do that are known as parietal cells. So you can see them here in the diagram or in this microscope slide. The mucus neck cells are the ones that are producing the mucus. But the purpose of this acid, along with breaking down the protein, which is really what the stomach is all about, breaking down, digesting protein, but they also kill off any invading bacteria or viruses, or many of the invading bacteria and viruses. So again, the coordination between your digestive system and your immune system is happening here, or one of the ways it's happening is in the stomach, with your acid in the stomach serving as a chemical defense against things that potentially could harm you. Enzymes, remember, are special proteins that make things happen, and so their job in the stomach is to break down proteins and to some extent lipids, though primarily it's protein, into smaller molecules. So there's a lot of digestion of protein that's happening in the stomach. The mucus, as I said, protects your stomach cells, keeps it being eaten away by that high acid environment. You have a pH of about 2 in your stomach, which is really very acidy. Some medications, some substances, and water and alcohol can be directly absorbed by the stomach, so they don't have to go into the small intestine to get into your bloodstream. And then after the food has been digested in your stomach, it gets a new name. It's called chyme, and it goes through another sphincter. This one is at the other end of the stomach, moving into the small intestine, so that's your pyloric sphincter. So now we've made it to the small intestine. And this is, though it is the word small is in the name, it's actually the longest section of your food tube. So most of your digestive system by size is your small intestine. It's small because the diameter is small. This is where digestion is pretty much finished up. So things are started in the mouth, and protein digestion is well accomplished by the stomach, but everything else is happening in the small intestine, and the bulk of absorption is also occurring here. So it is a very important part of your digestive system. If you were to lose part of your small intestine, there would be repercussions on your ability to digest and absorb the nutrients from food. Along with the organs in the food tube, we have accessory organs that help digestion happen, and these are the pancreas and the liver, and then the gallbladder that's connected to the liver. So they are producing things that help digestion occur. The pancreas produces a lot of digestive enzymes to break down all those food molecules, and the liver produces bile, which specifically is involved in the digestion of fat. Your small intestine is broken down furthermore into 3 parts: the duodenum or duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. The duodenum, which is the very first part of the small intestine, is actually not all that long, so it's kind of the smallest part, and this is where the bile coming from the liver and the enzymes from the pancreas are poured into the system to add to the chyme that has been coming from the stomach. So the pyloric sphincter is sitting here right at the end of the stomach, and as things move through, you have the digestive enzymes and bile added. You also have an antacid. You have things coming from the pancreas, chemicals coming from the pancreas that will neutralize the acid, because your small intestine is not set up to handle that high acid environment. There are not mucus producing cells, so we've got to drop that pH back to more neutral levels right away. The second section, the jejunum, is where most of your absorption happens. And so the cells themselves have little fingers on them called villi that stick out, and to make the surface area as large as possible. And then each cell itself has little finger-like projections on the cell called microvilli, which also then adds to the surface absorption. So you're talking about a lot of surface area, so there's lots of places for nutrients to move from the inside of the food tube into cells themselves. And then the final area of absorption will happen in your ileum, where you also are going to be adding bile salts to absorb the fats and various vitamins. And so after things have gone through all 3 parts of the small intestine, there's not a lot left that hasn't been digested or hasn't been absorbed. But things are very liquidy at this point, and if you have experienced diarrhea, you know how much liquid is there. In the case of diarrhea, we basically bypassed the large intestine, and food have gone almost directly from its state at the end of the small intestine to, being released from the body. And so you can see why the large intestine is needed to absorb this extra water, to reclaim some of the liquid from the gastric juices like I talked about earlier. And so this is large because of the diameter of the tube. It also, as you see, it goes across your body. So it's coming up and underneath your stomach and down the other side. So often when you have a stomach ache, you may be having problems in your large intestine, in this part that's the transverse colon that is below the stomach. So it may not be your stomach that's hurting, it might be your intestine. But anyway, you also have a large number of bacteria that live in your large intestine, and they will break down some of the things, the waste products that you can't break down. So they're helping you get a few more nutrients along with feeding themselves, and they produce vitamin K and some of the B vitamins. So they're also vitamin factories for you as they live inside you. The leftover waste, as the water is removed from it, this solid waste, is basically packed up and stored in the end of the large intestine, which is what we call the rectum. And then when triggered by the brain, you have the end of the large intestine where you have another sphincter, another circle of muscles that will release, and then the waste product, which we will officially call feces, moves out of your body through the anus. Another part of your large intestine you've heard of, I'm sure, is the appendix, which is really at the beginning of the large intestine. So food is entering here from the ileum. And the appendix was thought to be a useless organ and just sort of left over from ages past. But now scientists feel that it is one of the important roles it has is that it can act as a safe house, a place for beneficial bacteria to live in case of something like diarrhea that basically just flushes out the large intestine and takes a lot of that helpful bacteria with them. You have some left hidden in the appendix that then can go through and recolonize your large intestine. Digestion is primarily organized by your endocrine or hormone system, your nervous system, your brain and nerves, of course the digestive organs we've talked about, and then the circulatory system to carry those nutrients around the body. So again, all these systems work together. They're interrelated to keep you alive. Just to give you kind of an example how that works, just smelling food itself can trigger our brain to release saliva in your mouth, and the hormone gastrin in your stomachs, which prepare your body to digest that food. So just the smell kind of gets everything ramped up and ready to go. If you eat a large meal, there are actually stretch receptors in your stomach, part of your nervous system, that notice that you've put a lot of food in it, and that will increase the muscle contractions of the stomach so that it will empty faster. Large meals also can trigger contractions in the rectum, which will expel feces to make room for all this new food that's coming down from the stomach. If your meal is high in fat, then digestion is slowed down because it does take a little bit longer to digest fat. It's a more complicated process. Carbohydrates digest fairly quickly, protein's kind of in the middle, and fat is the slowest. And then, of course, after nutrients from the food are absorbed into the bloodstream, then the liver is the processing plant. So the blood from the digestive system goes first to the liver, and the liver will kind of decide whether things need to be stored or sent on to the cells. So it's a very complex process with many different organs and systems involved in making it happen correctly. So finally, your primary organs of the digestive system, the parts of what we call the food tube, because it really is a tube open at two ends that are going through the middle of your body, but going the mouth to the esophagus, to your stomach, to your small intestine and its three parts, and then the large intestine. Then we have two accessory organs, things that are not connected directly as part of the food tube. They have various little tubes, ducts, that go into the digestive tube, and the liver, which produces bile. Bile is stored in the gallbladder, so the gallbladder is just a storeroom until it is needed. If you can have your gallbladder removed, and then the liver will just be putting bile, trickle delivery bile all the time into the small intestine. And then the pancreas, which is very important in producing all of those digestive enzymes that will break down all of the nutrients, the large nutrients in food. So these various organs of your digestive system work together first to break down or digest food components and then absorb those nutrients into the body so they can go to cells to provide both matter and energy through carbohydrates that can be then used to make ATP so that you can stay alive.